Good Saturday morning to everybody, and welcome to HyperFit MD radio show, where we discuss age management along with Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin. I am Gary Byron. Good morning there, gang.
Morning.
How are you?
We're good. We're good.
Glad to hear that. How was your week?
Well,
You're doing well?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not good. Yeah, good.
Not good.
Good.
I'm well.
I'm not crazy. I'm just a little unwell.
Yeah.
How was your week?
It's been good. Yeah, we're
busy.
Yeah, we've been very busy, and thanks to this, we're seeing some between people hearing us here in real time on Saturday mornings. A lot of these shows are showing up on our website, and so they're seeing these shows on the website also. We're seeing quite a few people from this. Yeah, it's been good.
You know, I remember in the 80s, you heard of Thursday night being must-see TV on NBC, right?
Yeah,
This really is very important radio that this station provides. Well, that you provide via this radio station and all the different forms that you can catch this show. I think there's a lot of people that are think to themselves, man, this should have been around. This should have been on for years. I mean, there's so much information that can be learned from this show that I know it's only been a few months in the grand picture, but people pick it up when they pick it up. Truth be told, though, the sooner in your life, the earlier in your life that you're able to learn these methods, this way of age management, the better off you are.
Yeah, catch it before it turns into a nightmare.
That is so true, and I don't want to overstate it, because this show informs. Just listen to the show once, and you'll get a good vibe of the topics that we discuss here, but how necessary this information is.
Yeah.
And I really, and I don't say this to just anybody or everybody, but this is such vital information that you're disseminating.
A lot of patients come to us. We see a lot of patients who are in fairly good health in their 40s, early 50s, late 30s, in that range, who are just looking to find out to get a baseline, where they are in that moment, to assess what it is they need to take care of before it turns into something that they usually it's lifestyle related. Frankly. Yeah.
It's so I'm learning more and more about diet and but getting ahead of
The game.
Yeah. And somebody will say, "Oh, I'll worry about that when I get to it." Yeah, no, not everything is necessarily a death sentence, but why would you want to go through? Why would you want to endure something that you could have prevented this?
Yes.
Yeah, it's harder to reverse something.
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right.
But there's alternatives see, I think people get so pigeonholed, to, well, you handle it with this.
Yeah.
This pill will take care of that symptom, where
Exactly.
there's alternative methods. Yeah. And this is not to say, you're anti-prescriptions or you're anti-medication or you're but there's, what's that old saying? There's more than one way to skin a cat. I hate to say that, but there's truth to that.
Right.
There's in not every formula works for every individual, which is why when you have options and
exactly,
and most people don't know what their options are, and
that's
hence the reason why this show is so important.
Yeah, that's the key. And it's interesting. I use that phrase. There's more than one way to skin a cat all the time in practice, just because. I think part of it is we've been lulled into the concept that we can do whatever we want, and a doctor's going to give us a pill to take care of that. Diabetes is the classic example. I can eat that piece of cake. I'll just bump my insulin dose today. Those kinds of things. And the patients that come to us and the ones that kind of are successful in our practice are the ones that learn that to a certain degree they have to walk the walk of health, and we can help them. Basically, what we are is handholders, and to a very large degree, we employ a lot of medical, endocrinologic, or whatever intervention. But by the same token, most of what we do just sets the stage for success. Our logo says, "Your work, our science, change your life," and the work part of it is a significant part of it. And I don't mean to make it seem like we're going to take your cake away, or
Well, we've had this success in the past.
You go to that wedding and you can't have a drink. That kind
no.
of thing. That's
in
not
fact,
really
it
what
was
it's all about.
Francesca one time, I remember this. It wasn't even that long, maybe a few weeks ago. we're not, to your point, no, we're not telling you not to have a piece of cake. Enjoy life,
Right.
but everything in moderation. And that's exactly what you said.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly.
And that's what I tell my wife, my friends, my family when they talk about, if we, what was it, a couple weeks ago, or we had 4th of July. Oh, I can't. Like, you know what? Yeah, you can. I'm not telling you have a gigantic piece of pie or cake or whatnot. Have a piece, my goodness, but have a small piece.
Right.
Don't have 8 cookies. Have 2. Oh, I'm talking about the smaller cookies. Have 2 or 3 of them.
Right.
I'm not talking about the big cookies.
Well, I have that conversation with myself. Let's say it's Christmas Eve, okay, and you walk by a table that is just laden with what stuff that is bad for you, okay. Classic example. I like those little peanut butter cookies with the Hershey's Kisses.
Oh,
in them,
who doesn't? Yeah.
Those are one of my favorites. So I can eat 12 of those in 10 minutes, no problem at all. But what I tell myself is, okay, you know what that tastes like, all right? You know exactly what that tastes like. So go ahead and taste it. Enjoy the taste of it. This is why chefs can be skinny, all right? Chefs are tasting all day long, and they understand in a fundamental way that I don't have to eat a whole plate of this to know what it tastes like, to enjoy the taste of it. I don't have to fill my gut with it to enjoy what it tastes like, okay? And so I have to have that conversation with myself. I'm no different than anybody else in that regard. I mean, I have to have that conversation with myself to say, okay, you know what that tastes like. Go ahead and have one, but you don't have to have 7 more. That way, you can try that one over there, or a little bit of that one over there, that kind of thing.
It's a great.
So, it's a lot of it is just putting the brakes on at exactly the right time.
And also, you don't want to set yourself up for failure, where,
Right.
no, I can't have to have 0. Well,
Exactly.
cut the crap. You know what? 0 in front of people, right? And when no one's looking, you're going to,
Right.
no, just say,
Or sneak into the bathroom.
well,
without-
that's just it. Yeah. So don't say I'm going to have 0. Moderation.
Exactly.
Have a few.
Exactly.
Don't have the whole.
You sure do.
What was
you
that?
gotta get closer.
What was that? I couldn't hear.
I said I eat everything.
In moderation.
Right. Yeah. She eats about 8 times a day. So.
Only between 8 hours, right?
Yeah, I haven't been.
The
I haven't
remaining
been-
16
Yeah,
is-
I haven't been doing that lately. I'll get back into it.
Summer is hard, though. Holiday
hard.
season and summer.
It is hard. It is hard. Yeah.
Spring and fall, other than, I don't know, pumpkin coffee. Everything's pumpkin in the fall, right?
I hate pumpkins.
I'm lucky that I
Easy
hate
for me,
that.
yeah. It's easy for me not to eat it.
Yeah. Yeah, but summer is rough. Summer is rough because you're just 3 times a week. You're at somebody's home or you're doing something.
Cookouts,
right,
barbecues,
exactly. Yeah.
picnics, fire up the grill, Hey, you know what I wanted to talk about this morning? And we have talked about it, but I think way back when we were just in the preliminary days of this show. And I know we've picked up quite an audience since those early days. So for some, it'll be a repeat. But for most of you, you may not have been on board on this with this show yet. Let's talk about menopause.
Okay.
And just to show that we're not showing favoritism here, folks, why don't we next week talk about andropause,
Okay.
which is the male version
Sure.
of menopause. Let's just get that out there right now so that people aren't saying, oh, sure,
Right.
the guys are on the waist. And ladies before gentlemen, in case you're wondering why we chose menopause. Right? It's also probably the one that more people are familiar with. Yeah. Andropause is not as widely discussed or maybe even widely known as menopause. So you want to take this on from the perspective of a patient presentation? Or
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Okay, let's call her Francesca. No, let's not. let's call her Mary. No, it's okay. It's
Pick
just
some
a name.
generic-
It's just a generic name for a generic human being. And this is something that
Jane? Want to pick a Jane?
Yeah, the Jane is cool. Yeah, we'll pick Jane. This is something that we see in our office on at least weekly. Okay, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, because we're getting a little bit more busy. Jane is a 45 to 55-year-old woman.
Okay.
She's a school teacher. And it's been rough. It's been a rough year for her. But and many of the things that have been happening to her, she's attributing to the fact that she's her job and her job has changed profoundly, and therefore her life has changed profoundly. But during that period of time, she started to have some issues. First, it started with sleep, man. She was having a lot of difficulty sleeping. It's never been a problem for her before. She falls asleep just fine, but lately she's been waking up in the middle of the night and the covers are just soaked. 2 nights before she came to see us, she had to change the sheets because, and her husband's been complaining about it big time because he's awake all night because basically she's there like it's like she came right out of the bathtub into bed.
Sweating.
She's sweating. She's having night sweats. Her mood seems to have changed, and this is one of those things that she's attributed to the change in her job, is that she's crabby all the time, or she has her mood swings. She's happy sometimes, and then her husband will just say one little thing. It's like lighting a firecracker. She's right at him. He's not walking through the middle of rooms anymore. He's staying close to the walls and will not get anywhere inside of 10 feet of a dish on a table because they tend to fly. She is very much in love with her husband. She has not, since the day they were married, thought of another man, but she's not into being intimate anymore. She doesn't, whereas their sex life was very active, it's not going anywhere because she's just not into it anymore. And then on top of everything else, her periods, her menses have started to get weird.
Weird in what way?
Well, it's extremely variable. In her particular case, since Christmas time, she hasn't had a period since Christmas. She caught COVID at Christmas, and since Christmas time, she hasn't had her period. And then all of a sudden, last week, she had a flood. She thought she was bleeding to death, and then she will go on. Let's say this will happen a couple of times. And then her periods will be normal for 3 or 4 months, and then it'll go back to being weird again. So weird in terms of changes in the way it flows, length of time that she's having her period, the length of time between periods gets kind of variable over time. And, her friends say, well, maybe you're going through menopause. And so basically at that point, she's probably in what's called perimenopause. Women tend to go through menopause with, a year, a couple of years. It can take 2 or 3 years sometimes, but for the most part, it takes about a year. The GYN definition of menopause is that you are definitely in menopause when you've gone an entire year without having a period. We do it a little bit differently in our practice.
Yeah, because this scenario here is she's been getting him regularly,
right.
And then a couple of times she'll bleed out excessively.
Right, exactly. So a lot of women... We look at numbers on the blood work, and frequently women will continue to make estrogen, whereas the rest of, if they're not ovulating, they're not making progesterone, and so they'll continue to make estrogen in a kind of a bumpy way, without the kind of protective aspect of progesterone, which is when they kind of start having these symptoms. And then as the estrogen levels drop off, they start to have the hot flashes and the mood swings and the night sweats and all that other business. Day sweats, too. It's not just at night. It can happen in daytime. They just feel like they're on fire. And that's estrogen withdrawal, and that's menopause.
Okay. Some of the symptoms that you were mentioning, the sweats,
Yeah.
The excessive bleeding.
Yeah.
Are there other symptoms? Is it increased appetite? Is your
Lack of sleep.
okay.
Yeah.
Insomnia.
It runs the gamut. It really does run the gamut.
You're bloated.
Yeah, definitely. You hear about that a lot.
You can't lose weight.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, though, in hearing that. I mean, what changes occur in Jane's body? Let's start from the beginning.
Okay.
Take me through the steps of the different changes that's occurring internally
Sure.
within Jane,
Yeah.
from the beginning of menopause through from the onset to.
It's really
The
just
entire process.
it's in a way it's extremely complicated, but in a way it's very simple also. She's been ovulating every 28 days since she was 12 or 13 years old. It's not she's been ovulating all those years, every 28 days, and her ovaries, and we'll talk about andropause next week. Her ovaries have I don't want to use the word they get tired, but they stop to function. They stop to function. But during that period of time that the functioning of the ovaries stops, it's a bumpy road because, like I said, for 1 month she'll be cranking out normal amounts of estrogen, and then the next month estrogen levels will drop off. 1 month she'll ovulate, a couple months she won't ovulate, things like that. And it's really it's a slow process of ovarian atrophy that occurs over time, which is really what drives it, is estrogen withdrawal.
But also your body changes, your breasts change, your face changes, your bone density changes.
Well, that's
Your
over.
s-
We're going to talk about long term, but yeah.
How? This is
Your
like-
skin starts sagging. Gravity takes over.
but that's just aging. That's not necessarily. I mean, that could happen to.
Yes,
You can
yeah.
prevent that with hormone replacement. I mean, you can certainly change. Your body can. Your skin doesn't lose the collagen, doesn't get so dehydrated. For me, it's just enough if somebody tells me my face is going to expand, my ears are going to get bigger because I'm not on estrogen. I would go on estrogen immediately.
Well, the thing is that I'm sorry. What was the question that you
Well,
asked?
I'm talking about the changes, that
Yeah.
are occurring in your body over time.
Yeah.
From
Over
the onset.
time. Over time, yeah. Well, we were talking about the initial changes. What Francesca is talking about is the changes that occur over time, and so, like Francesca said, your skin loses elasticity, collagen levels in your skin drop off. We talk about bone. We talk about a person's bone bank. During all the years that you are hormonally intact, you are building your bone bank. You're maintaining the calcium levels in your bones and the structure of your bones. Once you go through menopause, you start to draw from that bone bank. You're not making bone anymore. You become, over time, osteopenic, and over time, most women, some women don't, over time you become osteoporotic. Osteoporosis is an issue. You start to lose muscle mass. We talk about osteopenia all the time, but what we never talk about, because there's not a pill for it, I'm going to get on my high horse here, okay? The reason we talk about osteopenia in women is because there's a pill for it, and it gets sold to us every afternoon, the daily in evening news or daytime TV and stuff like that. We never talk about osteopenia in men, and we'll talk about that next week, okay? But we never talk about sarcopenia either. Women and men lose about 10% of their muscle mass every 10 years or so from the moment that they go through menopause for the rest of their lives. So what does that mean? We talked about this before, I think. I don't remember, but we think we have. You lose that muscle mass. Muscle mass is one of the principal determinants of what your resting metabolic rate is. It's the most metabolically active tissue in your body, with the exception of your brain, okay? You start to lose that muscle mass. The resting metabolic rate, the number of calories that you burn per day just sitting in a chair, drops off. You continue to eat the way you eat, and what happens?
You're going to gain weight.
You turn into an apple. The biggest complaint that we hear all the time is about sleep, loss of intimacy in a marriage, and very much we hear about fat gain. And the reason is because of the withdrawal of these hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Women need testosterone. It's critical to their health because it's critical to maintaining muscle mass. It's critical to maintaining bone mineral density, and it is also critical to sexual function because it drives libido. Testosterone drives libido in women and in men. So in terms of long-term changes, and let's not forget, this is the one I really want to stress, another thing that we never talk about, a postmenopausal woman who does not embark on a well-balanced hormone replacement program starts to layer plaque on their coronaries and on their peripheral blood vessels. It starts the day that they go through menopause, and it gets worse as time goes on. That's why we talk about the cardioprotective aspect of hormone replacement therapy. It is critical to maintain that hormonal balance, because if you don't, you lose that cardioprotectiveness.
And Alzheimer's too.
Yeah. Stroke, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, what we call vascular dementia, which is kind of non-Alzheimer's dementia, those kinds of things.
Folks, you are listening to HyperFit MD, age management at its finest, with Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin. You can contact them very easily. They are online at hyperfitmd.com. And their phone number is 203-890-9797. 877. You were talking about menopause. I've heard you mention in the past premenopause. Today, I don't hear you mention premenopause. I hear something called perimenopause.
Perimenopause, yeah.
What is the difference? How do you differentiate the two?
It's the same thing, basically.
Oh, it's the same thing.
Yeah, two words for the same thing.
So, all right, so then I'm listening to you then intently.
Well, let me back up. When we're talking about a premenopausal woman, we're talking about a woman who's hormonally intact. It is not the same thing. A premenopausal woman is a woman who hasn't gone through menopause and hasn't started to go through menopause. Perimenopause is when you're in the middle of that process of change.
Okay, so they are different then.
Yeah, they're different.
And I'm listening to you intently. And I'm thinking, well, then what can be done about this? I mean, the only thing I heard you say that they would have to take estrogen. They would take testosterone replacement.
Right.
Because they've lost a lot.
Yeah.
But isn't there? What about people who are saying, I'm not taking any? No, I'm not taking hormone replacement. I'm not taking any of that. Do you tell them do you inform people what the consequences are? Or maybe there's just misconceptions about it more than anything else. Maybe you'd have to look at it from an educational perspective.
Oh, yeah. I mean, our practice is basically curriculum driven to a very large degree because there are so many myths out there. And unfortunately, those myths are fueled frequently by their own physicians who don't understand this stuff, have not read the more current literature about it. We talked about this before, I think, but in 2002, there was a study paid for by the U.S. government called the Women's Health Initiative, where they took 150,000 women. And the details of how this study were done, it was abysmal. It was just a terribly done study. And the New York Times actually stole the data from this study before it was ever crunched by the doctors who were doing the study, which the raw data from this study showed an increase in breast cancer, an increase in thrombotic stroke with these women. But if you look deeply into the details, number one, they were not using bioidentical or isomolecular hormones. They were using bench-made hormones, Premarin and Provera. Premarin is a conjugated equine estrogen. It's literally made from horse urine. The component of that pill that is actually bioidentical or isomolecular human estrogen is a tiny, tiny little part of it. The rest of it is horse estrogens. Progesterone and progestins, which is what they were using for this study, completely different things. The progestins that they were using, the only part of the female body that has receptors for those progestins is the uterus. We say in our business, because a lot of the party line in the GYN community is that if you don't have a uterus, you don't need progesterone. And what we say is that you don't need progesterone if you don't have a brain, a heart, lungs, kidneys, liver. Every single cell in the female body has receptors for progesterone. So anyway, about this study, they also took about 30%. Don't forget that the cohort that they were using were women that were 10 years past menopause. So they were all in their 60s. All of them had already started layering plaque on their arteries and so on and so forth. 40% of them had had hysterectomies already. So 40% of them did not get progestins, and therefore they threw them into estrogen dominance with benchmate estrogen. I could go on and on about this. This is a 3-hour lecture, so I'll spare you. But it was a terribly done study, and it has fueled this myth that hormone replacement therapy is bad for women since that day. And unfortunately, the allopathic physician community harbors that myth to a very large degree. I hate to abuse a word, but they're just not woke to this. They.
Well, what is it? Something that can cause cancer, right? Was that part of the myth, or was that?
No, breast cancer. Oh, definitely. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
what could cause cancer?
Those hormones that he's talking about, the synthetic hormones, not the bioidentical hormones.
Okay.
Well, that's the myth is that if I take a woman, well, first of all, let me say this, and I say this to every woman that comes to our practice. 1 out of 8 women in this country are going to get breast cancer in their lifetime. Okay, it's a sad fact. It's the same thing with prostate cancer in men. The statistics clearly say that 1 out of 8 women in this country is going to get breast cancer at some time in their lifetime. So if I have 100 women in my practice on estrogen, 12 of them are going to get breast cancer. Okay, And 12 of them are going to be told by every person that they know that they got breast cancer because we put them on estrogen. So I have this conversation with every single woman that comes through the practice seeking hormone replacement, or not necessarily seeking hormone replacement, seeking information about it, okay? We do, the first consultation we do in our practice is always free, and I'll sometimes spend an hour. Francesca can tell you, she's banging on the door. I'll sometimes spend an hour, hour and a half with somebody explaining to them why it's a good idea, why, number one, their symptoms are coming from this, number two, what we can do about it, and number three, that I'm not going to kill them.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I like hearing what you can do about it because it's not one size fits all. I mean, everything is customized to each individual's,
Every person that
symptoms.
comes through our door is an N of one scientific study. There's no cookbookery in our class, in our practice at all.
I'm glad you say that because there's always something to be done. There's nothing dangerous then that we need to worry ourselves about there.
There are dangers. There's a lot of it's done dangerously out there because it is a balancing act, and a woman needs to understand that blood work needs to be done. She needs to communicate with her physician. If it happens to be me, it's easy to communicate with us because we call them. If we don't hear from somebody for a while, we make sure that we communicate with them.
Folks, if you like or you can identify with any of what you've heard today or any other show, but particularly when this conversation this morning regarding menopause, I encourage you to do a couple of things. Number one, I'd really spend some time on HyperFit MD's website. It's simply that. It's HyperFitMD.com. What I would strongly suggest is to make an appointment. You can do that by calling them at area code 203-890-9777. Very easy phone number. Write it down. 203-890-9777. You can also email Dr. Guglin. It's really easy. cguglin, MD, that's Guglin, MD, at HyperFitMD at AMC.com. So cguglin, MD, at HyperFitMD, AMC.com. And, of course, you're located down in Milford at 88 Noble Avenue, Suite 105. I'd like to thank, as always, Dr. Charles and Francesca Guglin. I'm Gary Byron. Until next Saturday morning, have a good one, everybody. So long.